Welcome once again to a Tin Dog podcast. This time I'm going to be talking about, well, it's definitely the 11th Doctor. It's definitely 2013, and I'm thinking that it's episode 2. But it's series 7B, so is it episode 8 or 9? Does Christmas count? Or shall I just forget all that and calls it by its name? Calls it? I've been watching The Hobbit too much. I've just become Gollum, and I will call it by its name, The Rings of Akhaten. The Rings of Akhaten. Look, it's Souffle Girl's first official outing. Let's just go with that. The one with the god in the pyramid. No, that's Pyramids of Mars. The one with the speeder bikes. No. The one where they visit Mos Eisley. No, that's not it either. I've got it. The one that was on last week. The first time I watched this story, and let's face it, I do kind of watch this a few times before I try and have an opinion, I kind of went, fair enough. I had to think about it, which probably isn't the best thing that you have to do with Doctor Who. But, as is my wont, I've watched it a couple of times since. The first time I saw this, I was in a caravan on Anglesey. To my left, the views of the Irish Sea, and in front of me, a vista that I'd not quite seen on Doctor Who before. Yes, there are certain themes that reoccur in Doctor Who, things that get referenced and pop back. It was nice to see religion being mentioned, but we'll come back to that in a moment. When I was watching this, my wife just turned to me and went, "Why is he taking it to Mos Eisley?" Yes, it did look expensive for Doctor Who. It did look very well made, and thank God for computers and that kind of thing, and it's a testimony to Neil Gordon that he allows all of his friends and relations to produce lovely masks, and he keeps them in lovely big boxes so that they can wheel them out whenever they're needed. Some of the creatures looked a bit Hath-esque, and some of them just looked as though they'd give the extras a bit of a headache with all those flashing lights in front of their eyes. But they were nice. The main human-esque characters, you know, the ones with bits of latex stuck on their face, well, they were all right. They were dressed primarily in lovely flowing red robes, as is the wont of religious types in Doctor Who. Story-wise, well, I started thinking that it was nothing like any Doctor Who had ever seen before, but that's not quite true. It is a bit like Doctor Who we've not seen before, but it's more like Doctor Who we've read before. It had a lot in common with a lot of the Doctor Who Virgin novelisations. Big, sweeping gods and monsters and creatures that really couldn't be realised on TV. Huge races worshipping alien gods and artefacts. This was the sort of thing that we got a lot of in the McCoy era. But I've got a theory. This wasn't a nod to the McCoy era at all. This was a nod to the first Doctor. You see, we used to get multitudes of alien races in the time of the First Doctor. We used to get experimental creatures in the time of the First Doctor. Also, similarly in many respects to, say, the Aztecs, where you've got religious sacrifices going on that everyone else seems to agree with, but only the Doctor disagrees with, but he tries not to change anything in that story. In this one he does. There are pyramids in that too. With the First Doctor, you got many alien races. Grand councils, very odd-looking people. This reminded me of a First Doctor story. Perhaps not a First Doctor story that existed on screen, but more the essence. Now, the reason that I bring up the First Doctor, apart from the fact that Susan gets a mention in this story, is more to do with the theory that's occurred to me over time. And this theory is that you've got 8 episodes this year, not counting the 50th anniversary. More of that another time. And, strictly speaking, there were 8-ish original Doctors. Bear with me, It's just a theory. Episode 1 has to be dedicated to the reintroduction of Clara. So that leaves us with 7. Now, if this story, being the first adventure, is first Doctor-esque, being curious with lots of different creatures and nods to, well, let's call it mentions of his time with Susan. There's lots and lots of talk of grandfather. My mind instantly went to grandfather paradox. I was actually half prepared for the creature in the mountain to be, well, the Doctor himself. That kind of thing has been gone into before. But you know the scene where Clara finds the TARDIS and she bangs on the door and it won't let her in? I'm not sure that's the TARDIS that belongs to the Matt Smith Doctor. I think the first Doctor is actually present. He's there at that very moment with Susan. The TARDIS she was banging on the door of was the TARDIS of the first Doctor. That TARDIS wasn't going to let her in at all. It would simply confuse matters. Now, as well as being Mos Eisley's cantina, which is not a bad thing, 1976/77, you've also got the, well, let's put our cards on the table here and just call it Flash Gordon, shall we? The speeder bikes weren't even speeder bikes from Star Wars. They were speeder bikes from, well, they were rocket sleds from Flash Gordon the movie. Now, the sort of thing that people like us kick off about are things like being able to breathe in a vacuum. Well, let's just ignore that. The Doctor does mention extending force fields around the TARDIS, and then at various times the whole system seems to have air. This is the sort of thing that was completely ignored in the time of the first Doctor. Again, I keep coming back to this. But yes, there are also very nice nods, shall we call them, homages, rip-offs, whatever you want, to certain 80s other films. Indiana Jones is the main one that comes to mind, but these are all negative points. It wasn't a bad film. In the original trailer, I did think that the alarm clock creature, the end-of-level baddie, shall we call him, was a draconian of some sort, just redesigned. I was actually a bit disappointed to discover that. It's a curiosity of a story. It's one that I may come back to. I have watched it more times than I thought I would. But am I just trying to find, well, something good to comment about? The performances are marvellous. It's just not for me. The highlight of this whole story was by far the advert for Cold War. So I'm rambling and I've rambled, and all I really need to say is that Clara, this timid Clara, the one who will possibly evolve into the Clara that we know from the Christmas specials, is very well realised. The performances are subtle and over the top. Simply good. My wife likes Clara considerably more than she liked the Ponds. She works very well with Matt, and I do hope that Matt stays for one more year beyond Christmas. Give him and Clara's relationship a chance to grow and evolve. That would be a nice thing. Now, before I go, I just need to say that this week I am desperately playing catch-up. Some of the podcasts that I recorded some time ago have now become available to upload because I was pushed for bandwidth. But now that my bandwidth has become more open to me, I can upload a variety of new reviews. So bear with me if you see a few things appearing in your RSS feed. I'm just bringing you all the reviews I can from the worlds of Doctor Who. So until next time, be seeing you. You've been listening to the Tin Dog Podcast. Doctor Who and its connected properties are copyright and trademark of the BBC. No infringement is intended. To contact the show, email tin-dog@hotmail.co.uk. Whostrology, a Time Traveller's Almanac, is available through Telos Publishing or Amazon. Visit www.whostrology.com for further information. The Tin Dog Podcast is a founder member of the Doctor Who Podcast Alliance.
When we think of icons of business, legends such as Alan Sugar, Richard Branson and Oprah Winfrey spring to mind. Well, Peter Kelly, PR and Management are proud to present someone who has met all of those people, with the exception of Oprah Winfrey, of course. Will you please welcome Bonnie Langford?
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. It's such a pleasure to be here today. Now, seeing all your friendly faces reminds me of the wonderful time I had working on Doctor Who. I remember one day in particular, it was pouring with rain, of course, and I turned to Sylvester McCoy and said...
Just open the envelope, love.
Okay, thank you. So, the winner of the Hertfordshire Businesswoman of the Year 2012 is Virginia Trench from Trench's Riding School.